It's funny. I was just listening to a different podcast about how the four-year university is potentially dying right now.
Mhm.
And I can see that. I think at the time it was a state school for me. I'm in state California, so the tuition was reasonable. I didn't have to take out a bunch of loans. I think, gosh, that's a hard question. I don't think it was necessary. I think there were other things that I could have done that would have prepared me equally well for what I'm doing. I also studied comparative religion, so it's not like I got a degree in business. I was just sort of like, this sounds interesting. Turns out it actually does help me with what I do because we work with a lot of different faith-based traditions, but at the time that was not a part of my decision making. I think a four-year university, if you have the means to do it and you're not going into crazy debt, can teach you how to be resourceful, how to be an adult, how to get your first gas bill turned on, how to get your water turned on, how to live with other people. But there are other ways to do that.
Yeah. I guess my question was not necessarily specifically the 4-year university, but
Got
like
it.
getting outside of, because there's the ones who grew up in the funeral home, work in the funeral home, go directly to mortuary school or go
Yep.
directly to become a funeral director and never know anything different. It sounds like you at least had possible plans to go a different path
Yeah.
and then found
I
your way back.
actually wish, now knowing that I'm still in it 13 years later and that I really enjoy the actual work that I do, I almost wish that I had done something else first before jumping in
Mm.
with both feet. I've always been the kind of person, I take what I do very, very seriously. Like, I worked at a Dairy Queen when I was in high school. And at one point they were like, you're 15, you can be shift manager. And it was like the most important thing that I was doing. And I took it very seriously. And now I sort of laugh at that 15-year-old and I'm like, dude, you should have lightened up a little bit. So there is a part of me that goes, I wish that I'd had some experience that was not related to funeral service so that I could just take those lessons and bring them in. Because as we were talking a little bit before about, in a family business, you don't necessarily have all of the whatever objective opinions that you do in a larger company. And there are good things and bad things about that, right? You can make decisions where you go, we're going to take this gamble. We don't know if it's going to work, but we think it will. And you can do it. But also you may not have as many dissenting voices as you would normally have in a, business with a board of directors or
Mhm.
shareholders or whatever it is. So just having more experience outside the industry for me now, I think would have been helpful. Now, if I'd done it, would I have ever come back into the industry? I don't know the answer to that.
That's an interesting take then.
Right.
Yeah.
How's that for a non-answer to your question?
No. That's good. I always wonder because I didn't have that type of path where it was like, my great grandfather was doing this. And
Right.
so I went into that. And so I'm always interested in understanding how getting into death care was for those that, because we do see a lot of my great grandfather, father were, you know, funeral directors. And so I ended up being in death care too. So I was just wondering that calling seems pretty strong because you do see so many.
And it was interesting. Growing up, there was not a lot of pressure to come into the business, at least not spoken. And I didn't feel any unspoken pressure, but maybe there were, I didn't feel any unspoken pressure, but my parents actively tried to dissuade us from coming into the business just because they knew, it's not for everyone. It is tricky. There are things about being in a family business that are complicated. So I didn't feel like I had to do this.
How many siblings do you have siblings?
I do. I have 3 siblings. So one works in the industry, not in our company, and then one doesn't work in the industry at all.
So 2 for 3 came into death care, basically. Okay.
Yep.
Got it. So I know you do have a few online businesses, which is very cremation specific. The data that we've seen across our rangers is very similar to what you've seen. Like, people do put burials, but most of the time they're just there for show. No one.
Right.
I think once you have to get over a certain amount, and we found that to be a little bit less than $3,000, people are going to run a call. They're going to want to come in.
Yeah.
And stuff. But like, what do you feel is the biggest difference between the cremation society model and the funeral home?
I'm going to be really honest and let's say vulnerable here and say, I don't actually know what a cremation society is. You kind of hear the word thrown out a lot. And I know it used to be like a subscription model.
Yeah.
I don't really know. What is a cremation society?
So I use that interchangeably with just like a low cost online brand because that's
okay. That's what I would assume it is.
But I know. I mean, I think I can only think of like one company that actually still does like the subscription model.
Right.
And I think that's actually, Cremation Society of Illinois that I mentioned earlier. But
Yeah,
most people, I think they call themselves societies now, but it's not really a society. But
right.
I guess, in serving those types of families, and in serving like full service, do you find your approach to be a lot different in how you have to handle those families?
I think so in the online businesses or the kind of high volume, lower margin businesses, what I try and explain to our staff is, or what I try and impart to the staff is the service has to be relatively similar, right? We have to return calls, we have to answer questions, we have to make information available.
Hmm.
It just doesn't always have to be on the phone or in person. So we can utilize our website. We can, leverage Google searches. We can have systems like Parting Pro where they'll walk the family through and they sort of take a lot of that repetitive work off of the counselor's plates so that they're just answering the critical call, the first call, the unique questions. So we really try and cut down the amount of time we're spending on the phone. We try and encourage families where possible to email. We try and dissuade folks from coming to the office because it isn't what I've explained to our counselors, and they've seen it in real time, particularly during the pandemic, is actually the value and the quality of the service that you give to your families is pretty diminished when you're spending a ton of time with each family. So we're trying to automate a lot of those processes. You can't do it in my experience right now. You can't do it 100%. You can't offload everything, but you can do little things. So where possible, instead of walking the family through the vitals, have them go through the system, have them go through Parting Pro. That's 20 minutes that you just saved. And when you're multiplying it by, 100 to 150 families a month, that's pretty significant. In the funeral homes, I would say it's 100% the opposite. So the cost is higher, the
Hmm.
number of families is lower, but what we're really doing is we're making available pretty highly trained counselors and directors to be available to families, to be very responsive, to, respond to nonverbal cues. I think they're just totally different models.
Hmm.
And we've also trained them. So since we work hand in hand, we've also trained them to know when the other one might be a better fit. So with our traditional funeral homes, I've sort of gone, hey, look, if you spend a week with a family and really ultimately that lower cost online service is probably a better fit for them. If you've spent a week with them trying to walk them through the process, that's now a week that you can't spend with another family. So once you realize that, make it available and vice versa. If on the sort of lower cost, higher volume model, you go, gosh, this family just really needs more service, make it available to them. There's, even though you're co-owned, you're not the same office and you're not, and you run into problems there. Like, well, why is it $2,000 here and $1,000 there? Well, it's pretty easy to explain. And so arming your counselors with that information I found to be really helpful. And it makes them more confident too, because they have the same questions. Well, why are we charging 2,000 and they're charging 1,000? So explaining the actual difference in the models is helpful.